This is something new that I'm gonna do. And if you missed my most recent Get Ready With Me, then this might come as a surprise to you. But if you did see it, then you know that I do want to make some changes to the content on my channel. I want to just do things that I want to do and that I would typically hold myself back from doing because it doesn't fit my channel description. But now my channel is beauty and lifestyle and whatever. So here's the whatever. I have myself a whiskey neat. This is the drink of choice in my house. And today I want to talk about something weird that I don't think I've ever really talked about to anybody out of fear of them thinking that I am equally weird. So let's talk about my paranormal experiences. Right off the bat, I will tell you, I don't know if I believe in paranormal stuff. I think it's fascinating. I think it's nice to think about, but I'm the type of person that really likes to have like proof of things, and it's difficult to prove a lot of these things, and a lot of it is just whatever you yourself are experiencing and nobody else is experiencing the same thing. So that kind of gives me like pause, it gives me hang up, but at the same time I've experienced some things that are just kind of unbelievable. I don't know. I don't know if ghosts exist. I don't know if there is an afterlife. I don't know. There are definitely times whenever I'm like, oh, that would be great because I would love to hear from somebody again or reconnect with them again. But at the same time, I'm like, if I walked into my kitchen and my grandma was sitting there, would I freak out or would I be like, hey girl, what's up? I don't know what I would do. So let's go ahead and get into this. I have three kind of things. Two of them are specific to locations, and then one of them is, I guess, specific to me. So let's talk about the haunted places, I guess. I've lived in several different apartments throughout my life. Ever since I moved out, I probably went through seven different apartments in roughly 7 years. And a couple of them had some creepy crap going on. So the first one is actually the last apartment that I lived in. I guess I'm going to go from like least creepy to most creepy. So the last apartment that I lived in was a new construction loft apartment, but it was not new construction from the ground up. The building had been gutted and turned into lofts. But before that, in its previous life, it was a garment factory. And this was in the city of Chicago. And if you aren't familiar, a loft is where the walls don't go fully up to the ceiling. The ceilings are typically very high, sometimes 15 to 20 feet high, and then the walls only go up about halfway or 3/4 of the way, and then everything is open kind of. The only room in the entire apartment that actually had walls that went all the way up was the bathroom, for obvious reasons, thank goodness. But and then clearly the surrounding walls, the perimeter of the actual apartment. So we lived there for about 1 year and 2 months. And in addition to having just some crazy neighbors, which is probably a video for another time, they were hilarious. I also worked from home for a good portion of that time. So I was able to just log in remotely, working for the same company that I'd been working for the past few years. And it was great. I was like, cool, I'm just going to chill out all day, and do whatever I want to do while I'm working. And so I would be home alone with the dogs all day long until my husband came home in the evening time. And it was all good for like the first few months. And then I noticed whenever I started taking the back stairwell down to the lower floor to take the dogs outside, nobody else really, traveled through that stairwell that much. and it was kind of creepy looking in there. It was kind of like horror movie-ish looking, and nothing creepy ever happened in there, but I noticed as soon as I started taking that stairwell, things started happening in the bathroom. I don't know if like something, you know, got awakened or something like that, but oftentimes I would go into the bathroom and the light would be on, and I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I turn that off? And it was really messing with my head because I was like, I'm sure I turned that off, and then I'm like, maybe I didn't turn that off. So I kind of was just like not really cognizant of what was going on until it was happening for several months, and then I was thinking, okay, I am positive that I turned that light off. And I'm like, I tend like slightly toward OCD tendencies, not like clinically, but just, you know, I have that thing where it's like, did I turn the stove off? And now I have to go back and see, did I turn the stove off? So I started keeping track of turning off the light, and then I would go back in there, the light would be on. I was thinking, okay, this is creeping me out just the teensiest bit. And one time I went in there, I didn't turn on the light whenever I went in there. I peed, did my thing, and I got out of there, and I left the door open. And where I was working from home, I was kind of set up at a desk that was even with the hallway, and the bathroom was off the hallway. So I could see that the hallway was completely dark while I'm working at my desk. And then I looked over because I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and the light flickered on in the hallway while I was sitting at my desk. And that freaked me out. I totally was like, okay, I can never go back into that hallway on my own, which of course is irrational because a girl's gotta pee. But it freaked me out, and I never heard or saw anything else freaky in there. But even after changing light bulbs and everything else, it still continued to come on even whenever the light was off. And I don't know what is up with it, but it freaked me out. Story number 2 and location number 2 is actually the place that I lived at the longest. I lived in this one apartment. It was the best apartment ever. And I lived there for about, what was it? I think it was 4 years total in the building, but in that apartment, I lived in that one for 3 years. It was on the top floor of a vintage apartment building in Lincoln Park. Best place in Chicago, honestly. Well, it used to be. But anyway, I lived there. It was so amazing. I loved the apartment. It was a studio apartment, had a huge walk-in closet, vintage fixtures. It was just perfect. But the entire time that I lived there, I had extreme and severe night terrors and sleep paralysis. And I've never experienced those things before in my entire life. I've never had any sort of sleep disorder or like sleepwalking as a child or anything like that. So the first time that it happened in the apartment, I was like, what was that just happened? I would typically get home. I was going to school at the time in college. I would get home and I would immediately feel like so tired, and I would have to take a nap. So I would lay down to take a nap in the middle of the day. And during that time, like it would be a sensation of like being so dizzy that I just cannot physically stay standing. And as I would feel myself like falling asleep, I could feel like a presence, you know. It's like kind of whenever you're away from home for a while and you walk into your house and you're like, somebody has been in here, and you don't know who, but you just feel like something has been in there, and then you find out later that your relative or somebody stopped by, you know. So I would feel something with me, and it was to the point where I was so incredibly tired that I just could not open my eyes. But I kept telling myself, open your eyes, there's somebody in here with you. And I just couldn't do it. And then I would immediately fall into these like extremely terrifying, deep, deep dreams where I know that I'm dreaming, like lucid dreaming. And I know that I'm doing it, but I can't get myself to wake up. And I'm telling myself the whole time, like, you just have to wake up. And it always, whenever it happened, the dream was always taking place in the building. And it was just so sinister and creepy. And it was always like this kind of medical facility type of feel to it. Like, I never saw in my dreams anything medical, but it's just, you know how you know some things in your dreams, even though you don't see it. So it was one of those kind of sensations. And occasionally I would actually feel in my dreams somebody like sitting on the bed with me. And I'd be telling myself, you got to wake up. You've got to wake up. Somebody is in here. But I just couldn't do it. And it totally freaked me out, you know, and it's one of those things where you want so badly to wake up and you just can't do it. And I hate to even think about if something were to have happened, like a fire or something, I just would not have been able to wake up. There was a time whenever my husband, my then boyfriend, came in because he'd been calling me and he couldn't get a hold of me. He knew I was home. And so he used his key and came in, and he sat on the bed for like 5 minutes, shaking me and trying to get me to wake up. And I just would not wake up. He was afraid that I'd like slipped into a coma or something. So it was the deepest, most disturbing sleep that I've ever encountered. So I started asking the building superintendent, like, you know, what's up with this building? Like, you know, what's its history? It was built in the early 1900s, and it was originally a hotel that then later functioned as a hospital. So I think that that's where that kind of stuff in my head came from, but I knew nothing about the building at the time. And pretty soon after that, there was a pretty bad leak in the roof because I was on the top floor and I had to move out of that apartment, and they found me one on the second floor. I moved into it. Immediately, the dreams stopped, you know, the sleep paralysis stopped. I slept like a baby. Ever since then, it was that one apartment. It just did something to me, and I don't know what. I cannot explain it. And I've never again since that day experienced anything like that. It happened countless times during the time that I lived in that apartment, but ever since then, nothing. Moving on to the last and final story, number 3. It is the most personal to me, I guess. So whenever I was younger, I was probably, I'm gonna say about 10. Honestly, my childhood is kind of a blur. Now that I'm in my 30s, it's kind of like, did that really happen that long ago? But I had to have been around 10 because I don't think that I was yet in middle school, or it might have been right at 6th grade. I think it was 5th grade though. But we were looking through pictures with my grandma, and we came across this old picture, and it was her and a bunch of other people, and I recognized, you know, her brother and her sister and her other sister, and then there was another guy who turned out to be her brother that I just didn't recognize because he looked so different, and then another woman, and I was like, oh my gosh, that lady babysat me. Who is she? And Grandma looked at me and she's like, no, she didn't. And I was like, yeah, she did. I remember her. She babysat me. And she's like, what makes you think that? And so I described to her that I'd been to her house. I described the house, the way that it looked. I was like, oh, I remember her, you know, sitting me in front of the TV and we watched Sesame Street, you know, and I remember the shirt that she wore and blah, 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 blah. She just stared at me for the longest time and she said, that's just not possible. You're crazy. And I was like, no, I remember her. I remember going to her house. I remember that recliner that she had. Remember the bathroom? It looked like this, you know? And she's like, yeah, I know, but that's not possible because that's my sister Bonnie and she died the year before you were born. And I was like, no, she babysat me, you know, in that like kid wisdom of like, no, of course she didn't. She babysat me. It turned out that she had died the year before I was born in a murder-suicide. Her husband had came into the bar that she owned that was right across from the restaurant that my family owned, and he shot her and then shot himself. And because of that, nobody in my family really talked about her or, showed any pictures of her or anything because it was such a sore spot. So after talking about it, with her and stuff, and even I brought it up even after, I had gotten into high school and stuff, and I was like, do you remember us talking about this? And she's like, yeah, and you freaked me out. But it's just like, I remember everything about her house. I can describe the clothing that she wore, specific like tops and pants and stuff. I could describe things about her house, things inside of her house that I would never have known because I never actually went to her house. Even though the house still exists, I never went there because we never went there after her death. So I don't know how. I don't. And there's no pictures to my knowledge that I've ever seen of her house. And the only picture that I've ever seen of her is the one picture of my grandma with all of her siblings. It's one of those things that just kind of makes me think, like, what is up with that? Because I literally have no explanation for it. I don't know. It freaks me out just a little bit. I would love it if somebody could explain something like that so that I don't feel like I'm absolutely bonkers. This is not always going to be like real weird off the wall stuff, but just stuff that I want to sit down and talk about. And there you go. Like, I want to know if you guys have any experience with anything unexplainable, anything that defies explanation. Because oftentimes it's like, you feel kind of like you're off on an island by yourself, like Weirdo Island. But for my part, I hope that nothing else like the first two happens to me, because I don't particularly love that feeling of what is messing with me. I would love, though, to be able to connect with lost loved ones. But I just don't know. I don't know if that's possible or not. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm just like, I'm weirding myself out right now because I'm home alone and I'm just like, what is in here with me? But there you go. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got some entertainment out of it, and I hope I didn't creep you out too much. But I will catch you guys next time. Bye.